Hello and welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a brand new season, a brand new year. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I'm the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content here at laughingplace.com. A little rusty getting this intro out, but we are going to do an episode. It's been about a month since we did an episode at all of Who's the Bossk. So now that we're about a half a month into 2024, let's do an episode that's all about what we can expect from this year in Star Wars. And for that conversation, I have invited back on the show regular guest and the co-founder of Laughing Place. Her name is Rebekah Mosley. Rebekah, hi, how are you? What's been going on? How is your new year so far?
I'm doing well. New Year's going well. It's a dreary day here, so I'm having a little trouble kind of getting the juices flowing. I don't know. I feel like I'm a solar powered individual. So when
Okay.
it's days like today, I'm like running on 30% kind of thing. But no, a lot happening here at Laughing Place because as the new year comes, we start, getting a lot of information from Disney about all the different things that they have on the horizon. And of course, Star Wars is in that universe now. So yeah, excited to hear from you what's coming.
I don't know. I expected it to be a slower year this year because we had the strikes kind of slow everything down last year. But going through the list, it's still going to be a pretty full year, I think. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. First, I want to ask you about Barely Necessities. This is your regular Disney merchandise show right here on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. What are some highlights that you've stumbled across lately in the world of Disney merch?
Well, as always, this time of year brings some sales. So the team over at Petunia Pickle Bottom, those are really nice diaper bags. They've actually got some really deep discounts. If you're a Disney fan, you can check that out. But our episode later today, I actually, knowing I was going to come here, decided I'd do a little 7-item list. I call it the Sensational 7. And I pick 7 items kind of loosely inspired by the personalities of the dwarfs. But then I have an overarching theme. And this week I've decided to go with Star Wars. So I'm going to pick out 7 different items and kind of, like I say, loosely inspired by the personalities or descriptions of the 7 dwarfs. So Sleepy, Happy, Grumpy, Dopey, Sneezy, Bashful, and Dot. So that's what I've got going on. So I did a little Star Wars browsing online the other day.
Yeah, I'll have to tune in for that. And you two can also tune in. That's at 4 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon after this broadcast. We are going live right now on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. If you would like to comment along or ask any questions, please do so. We'll be happy to address anything you have there. We are going to do a segment now called the 5 Star Wars questions. Now, we are in season 5, like I mentioned, of Who's the Bossk. That means anyone who has been on the show 5 times will be treated to the 5th level of the 5 Star Wars questions. There's Doobie chiming in with a happy new season to Who's the Bossk. Thank you, Doobie, the other co-founder of Laughing Place. Rebekah, are you ready for level 5, the final level? Now, I say that not because this is necessarily the final season of Who's the Bossk, but I say that because I'm having a tremendous amount of trouble coming up with new 5 Star Wars questions every year. So we're going to call this the final level. I think if and when Who's the Bossk proceeds to a season 6 or beyond, I'll come up with something else for returning guests to do. But Rebekah, are you ready for level 5 of the 5 Star Wars questions?
I am. And having had a chance to look at these ahead of time, Mike, these are fun.
Okay. Yeah, my wife and I kind of brainstormed these together. It's the last. We're like dragging the bottom of the barrel, though. Really, I can't. I don't know if I have any more in me. So this is the 5th and final level of the 5 Star Wars questions. Number 1: do you have a favorite Star Wars movie poster?
And the answer is yes, but it was
Great.
tough because while I do adore the familiar and iconic A New Hope poster, I will have to go with Empire Strikes Back. You have Darth Vader's silhouette in the background. You have that kind of throwback to Gone with the Wind movie poster with Han and Leia, and then you have a Tauntaun and Luke, and then you have little droids off to the side. Yeah, no, this is for me. Oh, and it kind of you kind of have a nod to the icy planet of Hoth.
Yeah.
So it's all right there in a poster. And it was one of those things. I think it may have had to do with the time in my life, because I was too young for Star Wars when it came to theaters. But when Empire came, I was old enough to be, really pumped and excited. And so I have a feeling that kind of all of that plays into why that one is the one. When you say Star Wars, I tend to think of that movie poster first.
A great first choice for this question. The Gone with the Wind style Empire Strikes Back poster. Yeah, definitely a classic one. I don't have that poster in any form, but it is really one of the most iconic Star Wars posters out there. Let's say hi to Sonia in the comments, and Stephen Singleton from Cheyenne, Wyoming. Hello to both of you. Number 2 of the 5 Star Wars questions, level 5. What is your favorite Star Wars fight scene or action sequence?
This is so hard. So first off, I was like, I'm gonna be mad if I overlook if it's just my favorite doesn't come to mind immediately. So I went out there and looked at, all these different entertainment sites have the various lists of what their favorites are, what the 10 best are of this, that, and the other thing. So I went through a bunch of those. Doobie was my husband. He was like, it has to be the one where I have the high ground, that battle between, no, not for me. And
it
then
just
I was
goes
like,
on for too long. That fight just goes on for too long, in my opinion.
and then I was like, well, what is okay, so fight scene versus action sequence. I was like, for me, those are so different, because I was thinking Luke versus the Dark Troopers in Mandalorian. When you said fight sequence, that came to mind. It probably is recency bias, but that was one that popped into my mind immediately. As far as action sequence, I always say that I became a Star Wars fan when Leia and the guys have their backs against the wall, when they're rescuing her on the Death Star. She kicks open the door to the trash compactor and tells them both what they should be doing and takes charge, and that whole sequence of her rescue and them getting to the Falcon is like some of my favorite movie, period.
Yeah, Into the Garbage Chute, Flyboy.
Yep.
Great choices there. Yeah, in the wake of Return of the Jedi, we never really got to see Luke at the peak of his Jedi powers, except for the battle with Darth Vader, really. But getting to see him let loose on those dark troopers was pretty neat in The Mandalorian. And then, yeah, you can't go wrong with the Death Star escape from the prison level. So pretty sweet. Yeah.
No, I was gonna say, when I was doing this, I came up with a list. Let me see. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had like nine items when I just kind of went through. I was like running through, and because it was just, there's so many amazing. I mean, because then you start thinking, well, what about that battle between Luke and Vader in Empire? And that one's so amazing,
right?
And it has that moment of revelation, and then the battle when he's fighting the Emperor, and you have the juxtaposition of that with what's going on in Endor in Return of the. There's just so many. Like I say, it was so hard for me to pick.
It is a tough choice, that's for sure. And the next one might be just as difficult a choice. We're going from fight scenes to costumes. Who has the coolest costume in Star Wars? And I'm asking my guests to be specific about this one. Don't just say Han Solo. I want to know which Han Solo costume. You know what I mean. Yep. What do you think, Rebekah?
Okay, so coolest. That was my challenging word to figure out. So if we're going with coolest, as in which one would I most like to experience myself, okay, then we're
wear
going
yourself or see in person.
If you told me you could I would get you a screen realistic Star Wars outfit, and you would wear it, and it would be yours. Which one would I pick off the shelf?
Okay.
And I would say the lake dress that Amidala wore there on Naboo with the lake, that beautiful gown with the ombre of the purple and the yellow. So amazing. But that doesn't feel like the coolest.
Okay.
So
Doobie wants to say that, clarify that coolest means which one you would wear in a heat wave. I don't know if I agree with that.
So
But
for me growing up, coolest would have been the Emperor's Royal Guard, but
oh
now
yeah.
that was totally superseded by the elite Praetorian Guard. I think those are the coolest Star Wars costumes.
The elite Praetorian Guard in The Last Jedi?
Yep.
Okay, what did you think of the Praetorian Guard as they showed up in The Mandalorian season 3?
Okay, you'll have to refresh me how they
Okay.
differ because
I
it's
don't
not popping in my head.
man, I don't know if I could even tell you.
Here, I'll,
They
I'll do
are they are different. I know the costumes are different, but
okay.
how they're different, we would have to ask one of the costume designers.
Ooh, oh, those are nice too. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, they almost have the helmet, right? Is where I think the
Yeah.
differentiation is coming. Oh man. Yeah, those are pretty awesome. I think I just really like that shiny and matte red
Yeah.
combo that you get with those Royal Guard. So yeah.
Yeah.
And they're just so
Yeah, I mean,
instantly menacing and horrifying.
I think where I really appreciate the costumes the most is with the toys. So I really want them to make the new Praetorian Guard, the Mandalorian version, in a Black Series action figure. Hopefully we'll get that. These 5 Star Wars questions tend to lean toward the positive. You know, what is your favorite blank? But I did want to, before we wrap up on the 5 Star Wars questions as a whole, I wanted to put in just one little negative one here. So I threw in this one, number 4. If you had the power to erase one piece of Star Wars media or one element of the Star Wars franchise from existence, it never existed, what would you choose?
I am really not a fan of the enhanced Jabba concert.
Oh boy. Oh boy. That's going to be a popular one. I think a popular answer to this question. You mean the Jedi the song is called Jedi Rocks in
Yes.
the Return of the Jedi special edition. I have come to appreciate it more since I saw this band called Blues Harvest cover it in concert. They usually play it at Star Wars Celebration at some of the after parties, and their version of Jedi Rocks just kind of brings down the house. So for that reason, I enjoy it. But yeah, in the context of the movie, would much rather have Lapti Neck, the original song. And Justin points out that you didn't like to see his tonsils. The singer of that song, I believe his name is Joe Yauza. The camera kind of zooms in on his CGI uvula in the back of his mouth, wagging back and forth. What don't you like about this sequence?
For me, it just ventured too far into the cartoon. I've always appreciated the way that those films, had a bit of levity in the midst of the drama. I think, in my mind, to kind of keep it balanced for a younger audience, but that just ventured into the complete cartoon for me, and kind of was like, nah, I didn't need that.
It definitely doesn't feel like it fits in the movie. And it was tough watching it on the big screen again when I saw Return of the Jedi at El Capitan for the 40th anniversary last year. When I watch it at home, I tend to watch there was one DVD release that had the original cuts. It was a transfer from the Laserdisc. So those are my kind of go-tos. But yeah, it's a tough scene to sit through, and a weird choice on George Lucas's part, I guess, among a number of weird choices. Number 5, the 5th and final ever, really, 5 of the 5 Star Wars questions. What do you personally want to see happen with Star Wars in the future? And I mean this in the broadest sense possible. Do you have any personal desires for the continued evolution of the Star Wars franchise?
This falls into the be careful what you wish for kind of thing. But having been somebody who totally adored many of the extended universe novels with Luke and Leia and Han, while it's terribly frightening there's this part of me that would love to see them recast and offer us more
Mm.
adventures of young Leia, young Luke, young Solo. And I don't even, and it doesn't even need to be from the Star Wars. I mean, I feel like Solo deserves more of a chance than it got, and just the notion of that. I don't think only Harrison Ford can successfully be Han Solo.
Yeah, I agree
So
with that. So you're saying like everybody was kind of fan casting Sebastian Stan as Luke Skywalker. You're saying there's a you would embrace something like that if they did that, and you had more adventures with Luke and company in
yeah,
the wake of Return of the Jedi.
right, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to see that. Um, even like I say, even going in and filling in a little bit more between, you know,
Mm,
some of the films that we already have, a little bit,
yeah.
maybe a little bit more of what happened between Empire and Return of the Jedi, or you know, things like this. Explore a little bit of that. The other thing, I mean, the other thing that I'm kind of surprised we haven't dived into yet much is maybe a little bit more of a look at kind of uh, and what was happening concurrently, like kind of in the same way that Disney did it in a fun way,
Yeah.
you know, kind of Lion King from another point of view.
Oh, okay. Like
You know,
what was that called? The Shakespeare one. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead was the
okay.
I
I
think
was thinking
it's
Lion King one
Hamlet.
and a half, but okay,
Yeah.
your reference works well too. but, but yeah, do you know, offer something like that. You know, where maybe we explore the what the Endor forces were up to when we weren't, you know, before we got there, you know, kind of before we got there as far as what we saw in Return of the Jedi or things like this. But
Interesting. Yeah, I think they've done a lot of what you've talked about. They've done in the publishing world, but yeah, it would be cool to see that in live action. There was that book Lost Stars from Claudia Gray that was kind of
mhm.
these two, a rebel and an imperial, and kind of their point of view of the whole galactic civil war. And then they've of course filled in the gaps between the movies and the comic books. But with live action, it could be interesting to see a lot of that as well. Great. So that's going to wrap up the 5 Star Wars questions and bring us to Star Wars headlines for this season 5 premiere episode. And we got some very, very big Star Wars news within the last week. And that is that likely the next Star Wars movie, at least this is what the press release made it seem like, the next Star Wars movie that we're going to be getting in the theater, should it pan out. There's been so many announcements like this that we can't keep track of. We don't know what is going to actually happen, but The Mandalorian and Grogu, to be directed by Jon Favreau, creator of The Mandalorian, will be going into production this year, according to Lucasfilm. What were your initial thoughts about this announcement, Rebecca?
Oh, I'm excited because so much of The Mandalorian as I watched, I was thinking, wow, I'd really have enjoyed seeing this on a big screen in a communal setting.
Yeah.
So the idea, I mean, just by, you know, the what we were talking about with Luke, the appearance of Luke, the notion of having had that experience in a communal setting on a big screen, you know, that's very, very appealing. And knowing that the creatives who brought those types of adventures to life are behind this is very exciting.
I'm excited for it as well. I was surprised by the announcement because, obviously they had announced this Dave Filoni movie that is supposedly going to wrap up the Mandoverse of stories. We don't know what the target date is for that movie, but there's all these shows that are connected to the Mandalorian. There's the Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka and the Skeleton Crews coming up. And the idea was, you'd have all these Disney Plus series, and then that would culminate in a big theatrical movie. I'm assuming with Grand Admiral Thrawn as the main villain, as the big bad, as they say. And now it seems like, maybe they're pivoting toward doing more of this stuff on the big screen, which doesn't surprise me. It does, like you said, it does feel like it fits. These shows have felt cinematic from the very beginning. a lot of, I've seen a bunch of these episodes on the big screen at premieres and stuff.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
you've had the opportunity to do that, so
Yeah, so it definitely works in the theater. It plays great in the theater, and I'm sure they'll develop and shoot this movie as though it's a movie and not a TV show. So, however that would affect Favreau's choices in bringing this to the big screen. The only thing I would say, Alex Damon from Star Wars Explained said in his reaction that it felt a little bit more like a business decision than a creative one, and I think that was kind of my initial reaction as well. That it kind of turned out that Disney Plus isn't making Disney the kind of money that they wanted it to, and they want to start sending people back to theaters, because the theatrical side of the business has been struggling as well. And this seems like a good plan to do that, I guess. So it's probably a smart business decision. It also feels like, because Jon Favreau has now proven that you can make Star Wars on a limited budget with the volume and this kind of revolutionary new technology that they're using on this show, that this could be a good like proving ground that you can make a Star Wars movie that doesn't have to cost however many hundreds of millions of dollars that they usually cost. So that's something to consider as well. But yeah, I think I'm excited to see it. I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with. I hope that they continue with the series. That's the other question too, is like, will The Mandalorian continue on Disney Plus, or is this just going to be one more movie and then the Dave Filoni movie and that'll be it? A lot of questions still about this that I'm sure we'll find out more about as the months go on. But for now, all we know is this movie, Mandalorian and Grogu, is going into production this year. That probably, I don't know, if I had to guess, I would say they're aiming for, what do you think, December 2025?
maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
That would seem to fit.
Yeah. So again, another question mark. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just when it comes to Star Wars in particular, I'm very hard pressed to get excited until you're getting things like Diego Luna on the red carpet saying, we have just a few days left, kind of scenarios. And even then, now with the way streaming is, I'm not even sure I can get fully invested at that point anymore.
Yeah, that's why I was so happy when I got the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian on 4K disc for Christmas. I was like, oh, they're finally like, now this is the first time I felt like, oh, no one can take these away from me.
It's a weird phenomenon right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But so we're not sure about the future of The Mandalorian on TV, but one of the spin-offs we know now is in development on its second season. So in that same press release that they announced the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, we found out that season 2 of Ahsoka is in development under Dave Filoni. He also put out a sketch on social media the following day with the finger of that statue of the Mortis gods pointing. And I think I was hoping they would do this because there's a lot of dangling threads from that first season. What were your thoughts about this part of that announcement?
I'm very excited that we're going to explore more with Ahsoka. The fact that particular statue was included is exciting because I'm eager for kind of a deeper exploration of, for lack of a better word, the religion of the Jedi, so to speak. On the flip side, there's also a sadness because one of my favorite characters and one of the dangling threads, that actor has passed away.
Yeah.
And so you really wonder how that's going to impact, what story was intended to be told that maybe won't be, it's like, how did that impact whatever vision the creator had moving forward, Filoni had, moving forward, because that obviously, will come into play. And, so like I say, it was one of those things where it just reminded me of how much more we could have had from his performances, but we've lost him.
Yeah, that was definitely frustrating at the end of that season, the first season of Ahsoka, knowing that he wasn't going to be able to appear anymore. And I think in that finale episode, he was on screen for like a minute or something. But yeah, we have to. That's the other question we have to ask: is how is Dave Filoni going to handle that character? Will Balin Skoll be recast? Will he be written out? I guess it's another thing that remains to be seen. So we'll find out eventually. Let's talk about
Wait,
Young Jedi. Yeah,
well, I'm curious. What are you looking forward to hearing?
yeah,
What are you looking forward to learning more about when it comes to Ahsoka season 2? What's kind of lingering in the brain of Mike
yeah.
Celestino?
No, I think you're right. Because that element of the mythos has been hinted at for so long. You know, there was one big arc of the Clone Wars about these Mortis gods, and they seemed so incredibly important, and then they just kind of abandoned it. And then by the end of Rebels, they started getting into it again. There was the mural that they entered into the world between worlds, and it feels like, oh, this is such big stuff. But it just kind of gets pushed to the side, and then they come back to it every decade, like once a decade, it seems like. So yeah, that would be the most interesting thing to me. Then I'd also love to see Ezra's side of the story, because he's now reunited with Hera back in the Republic, the New Republic. How do they get the band back together? What do they do about getting Ahsoka and Sabine back from the other side of the galaxy?
Are
Those would
you
be the questions. Yeah.
are you interested in seeing more of how Thrawn is impacting that other portion of the universe?
Yeah, no, definitely. Thrawn is high on that list too. But I guess in my head, I had assumed Thrawn was going to become a bigger presence in The Mandalorian when that returned for season 4, which we don't know whether or not that's even happening. I saw a rumor which was like, oh, the first 6, there's going to be 6 episodes of Mandalorian season 4, and then the finale would be the movie, which would be interesting. That would be an interesting way to do it. But then I saw somebody saying, no, that's not true. But yeah, I figured, okay, Ahsoka season 1 was about getting Thrawn back to the main part of the galaxy, and then he's going to be the big bad in the Mandalorian from now on. But now
Okay.
that Mando's going to be in a movie, I don't know. I'm not sure. But
Mm.
yeah, I guess they could continue with that story in Ahsoka
Well, or
and
maybe
go
they could kind of tease and not give us enough of Thrawn so
right.
that when we have that theatrical release, that's where
Yeah,
we get Thrawn as people want.
that's true too. Yep, it could go a number of different ways. Young Jedi Adventures is an animated series that's on both Disney Plus and Disney Junior. And we're getting more episodes from season 1 of that show dropping February 14th. So they made a whole bunch of episodes. They've been releasing them in little batches for the
Mhm.
last year, roughly the last year. And there's another batch of those. I'm not sure if this is the final batch of episodes, but they'll be coming on Valentine's Day, February 14th. So just in case you're wondering why we don't mention that in the 2024 Star Wars preview, it's because we got it out right here. They just announced the date. That's the headline that we're talking about here, is the date of the return of Young Jedi Adventures, February 14th, Disney Junior and Disney Plus. One other item that came out about Star Wars theatrical films was from the Game of Thrones HBO series creators and showrunners, Benioff and Weiss, who, you know, the news broke a few years ago, that they were working on a Star Wars movie. Then eventually, you know, as it happens frequently from Lucasfilm, this kind of evaporated, and they said they were no longer working on it. And this past week, they finally let it slip that they were working on basically the Dawn of the Jedi project that we now know the director James Mangold is doing. So interesting. I think that, you know, based on Game of Thrones, that seemed like an appropriate project for Benioff and Weiss, but I also think Mangold will do a good job with that. So again, so long as it actually happens. Do you have any other thoughts on this project beyond
No, because
yeah,
no, because like you say, I'll wait a little bit longer before I start to get
yeah,
invested.
Exactly. You never know. I think I was counting like how many of these Star Wars projects are actively still in development, and
Mm.
I want to say it's 5 or more because you have the 3 that they announced at Celebration last year, plus Mando and Grogu, and plus the Taika Waititi one. And then, they keep saying, oh, maybe the Ryan Johnson trilogy will eventually have. So
Mhm.
who knows? Up in the air. This week we have new comic books. They're coming out tomorrow. You've got The High Republic #3 by Kevin Scott, Obi-Wan Kenobi #4 by, I want to say Mark Guggenheim is writing that. It's the adaptation of the TV series. And then Bounty Hunters #42, which is the final issue of that series, actually. So that's wrapping up, by Ethan Sachs. He's going on to write one of the comics we're going to talk about in the 2024 preview. Dr. Aphra is also ending later this month. So some turnaround, some turmoil happening in the Star Wars comic book world as we enter into the new year here. But I'm excited to read and review those. And you can find my reviews of all the Star Wars comics over at laughingplace.com. Okay, that's the end of Star Wars headlines this week. Let's get into the main topic for this episode. And that's looking ahead, looking forward to the year in Star Wars. And we're going to start with the comic books, actually, where we just left off. So you have the ongoing comics that are happening right now that I just mentioned. The High Republic by Kevin Scott. There's also the High Republic Adventures by Daniel Jose Older. There's the flagship Star Wars title by Charles Soule. And then there's Star Wars Darth Vader by Greg Pak, or Greg Pak, I believe is how it's pronounced. And those are all continuing into the new year. Bounty Hunters and Dr. Aphra are both ending this month. New titles that are coming up starting January 24th, right there on the screen. You can see if you're watching this live. We have the adaptation of the Timothy Zahn 2018 novel, Star Wars Thrawn Alliances. This makes perfect sense that they're doing this right now because in Ahsoka season 1, Thrawn talked about how he knew Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker. And that story was told in this novel, Star Wars Thrawn Alliances. Now that story is being adapted into a comic book for new eyes, maybe who read more comics than novels, or people who just want to consume this story in a different medium. Is this something that would interest you, Rebekah?
More so than the novels, yeah, because I've read Heir to the Empire a few times. That's a different trilogy, right? This is a separate.
Yes. So this was the new canon, the current canon Thrawn trilogy that Timothy Zahn came in to write.
Yeah. So I find Thrawn not nearly as interesting as the rest of my Star Wars peers, and I try so very hard because he is so, like, I can tell he is popular among the bulk of the fan base, so I know I'm going to encounter him, but I can't. I think he's just too there's too much of what I don't enjoy about Star Wars is manifested in him.
Okay.
So it's like all movies you enjoy, there's aspects of it that really capture you and other aspects of it that aren't, as much your cup of tea.
Yes.
And in this case, I think he represents the aspect of Star Wars that isn't my cup of tea.
Fair enough. Yeah. I'm curious to revisit this story. I read the novel when it came out. I guess it would have been almost 6 years ago. And Jody Houser has written some of these adaptations before. They actually adapted the book that preceded this, which was just called Star Wars Thrawn.
Mm-hmm.
So that has already been a comic book adaptation. And now we're getting the second novel in that trilogy. I hope they follow through with the third one as well.
So I'm grateful that this is coming because it will be less of a time. I will read it and then become aware of Thrawn and this storyline without having to invest the time of reading several novels.
That makes sense. Also, I am more interested in the comic adaptations of novels than I am in the comic adaptations of live action shows, which are basically like 1-to-1, like scene for scene reproductions of those episodes.
Yeah.
This, it takes a little bit more work, I would say, or thoughtfulness, artfulness to bring a novel to the comic page. I think you have to
I
really think
understand.
about, because there's just a lot. There's a
Yeah,
lot of
no.
story in one novel that
It's
you
like
have to really
reverse
work around.
storyboarding.
Yeah,
When you read the transforming the word into picture versus taking a sequence, reducing it to a single image. Yeah, no, I
exactly.
get you.
And then we'll have starting in February 7th, we'll have Mace Windu. This is a mini series written by Mark Bernardin. And I I have noticed, I think because it's the 25th anniversary of the start of the prequel trilogy. Phantom Menace came out in 99. It's 25 years ago, believe it or not. They're going to start leaning into a lot of prequel content. We're going to get that from Marvel Comics. We're going to get that from the novels, and we're going to get that from the toys. Hasbro has already announced a bunch of Phantom Menace and prequel trilogy action figures coming out. I'm okay with this. I have come to accept the prequels. It actually has saved me some money already because I don't buy as much of this stuff. I buy the original trilogy era toys and stuff. But yeah, I'm curious to see what they do with the Mace Windu comic book. Obviously, this is Sam Jackson. It's hard not to like him in the movies. Probably one of my favorite characters from the prequel trilogy. Does this appeal to you at all,
I'm
Rebekah?
very excited about the broadening the story of Mace Windu. Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't get enough of Mace Windu in those films
Yeah.
25 years ago. Oh man. Whew.
Yes, and not only is Mace Windu getting a comic book, he's also getting a novel that we'll talk about a little bit later
Mm-hmm.
on. But next in the world of comics, in February 21st to be exact, we'll get a one-shot from Marvel called Star Wars Visions, Takashi Okazaki. He is one of the animators who contributed to the Star Wars Visions animated series on Disney Plus. In fact, I think his episode was the first episode of season 1 of Visions, and
Okay.
that story was called The Duel, and it already has been expanded to a novel and a previous comic book. So
Oh,
this story is kind of like the only real like continuing story from Star Wars Visions, and I'm glad to see that they're doing more with it. So this will be coming out February 21st. It's called Star Wars Visions Takashi Okazaki. And then I kind of hinted at this earlier, in March 20th, we'll be getting Star Wars Jango Fett, another mini series set in the prequel trilogy era. Star Wars Jango Fett by Ethan Sachs. Ethan Sachs has been writing Star Wars Bounty Hunters for 40 plus issues, and that series is ending. He's going over to this mini series. How do you feel about these last two that I talked about, Rebecca?
the Django Fett didn't have my attention until you mentioned Aura Singh
Yes.
is going to be you in your write up here. You say
Yeah.
that bounty hunter will make an appearance. I find that bounty hunter particularly fascinating. So I am so now this has my attention. As to the other, I had not realized that that particular Visions short had continued on
Yeah.
in so many different forms. So I'm going to have to go check that out because I did enjoy the dynamics of that episode with kind of the setting of the kind of a feudal Japan
Right.
and everything. So yeah, so now I'm like, okay, well I'm behind on my reading all of a sudden, and I'll have to catch up.
It's very rare and very interesting when we get a Star Wars story that's not connected in any way to the canon. Like this is entirely the Vision stuff is entirely in its own timeline. There's no, it's using the iconography and sort of the mythology of Star Wars, but not, it doesn't take place in the prequels. It's not doesn't
Yeah,
take place in the original trilogy. It's not in the sequel trilogy. It's just entirely outside of all of that. And I find that very, very interesting that you don't have to worry about any kind of foreknowledge. It's just kind of its own thing, off in an alternate universe, kind of like What If of Star Wars, of Marvel's What If comics and the animated series. Visions was sort of that kind of thing, but for Star Wars. So looking forward to all those comics. Let's go to books next. So yeah, in the piece that I wrote on Laughing Place, I also mentioned all those comics that are continuing there. You can see the covers of some of those. And in the world of books, starting in this month at the end of January, we'll be getting another new High Republic book. I've actually read most of this already because they sent it to me early to review. This is called Star Wars: The High Republic: Escape from Velo, written by Daniel Jose Older, who has written a bunch of this High Republic stuff, and Alyssa Wong, who was the writer for Star Wars Dr. Aphra, this most recent volume of Dr. Aphra that is ending this month. This is the middle grade novel, first middle grade novel of Phase 3 of the High Republic.
How are you enjoying Phase 3?
It started off pretty interesting. It's got, there's some different things going on. The Nile are the villains again, and they've kind of like walled off part of the galaxy from the Republic. So there are people who are trapped behind that wall. Some of the good guys are trapped behind that wall, and the rest of the galaxy is still in Republic space. So that kind of it makes things pretty interesting for both sides of the story. It hasn't, Phase 3 is still really getting started. There's been one adult novel and a few comics, and then this is the first middle grade novel in the third phase. Interested to see where it's going. I haven't enjoyed these middle grade books as much as I have the adult books and the young adult books. Actually, the young adult books are some of my favorites. Middle grade, you can really tell that they're aimed at a younger crowd. So I'm not the target audience for the middle grade books, but you can read my review of Escape from Velo probably next week. It'll be put up. I usually put them up about a week before the release date. So look out for that on laughingplace.com. The Art of Jedi Survivor, the Art of Star Wars Jedi Survivor. This is another art book inspired by the video game that came out last year, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. This is from Dark Horse Books. It's coming out February 20th. I always like these art books because it's just so much cool concept art to look at there. Is this something that interests you, Rebekah?
I know that there'll be a lot of really stunning visuals that'll come out of this book. So that'll be nice to see as somebody who doesn't game, to kind of see the worlds that were created. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a chance to explore the worlds, like I say, because I don't play the game. I'll check out YouTube clips of gamers who go through and play it, so that I'm aware of like storylines or characters or that kind of thing. But yeah.
Such a gorgeous game too. So
yeah,
I imagine this kind of book is very rewarding to the people who've worked on the game. Like, oftentimes in other franchises, much of this work would go unseen by the public. It just fades into the background, goes into an archive somewhere. But with Star Wars, they've been pretty good since the very beginning of releasing a lot of the concept art for the movies, the TV shows, and now the video games. So
is there any particular planet you recall that you visited in Jedi Survivor that you're looking forward to seeing static art from? I wasn't, I don't know if there were any particularly unique.
Yeah, the main planet that serves as kind of the hub of the game is called Kobo, and you hang out most of your time spent on that planet. Well, it's kind of an open world planet, and you can explore all the hidden caves and crevices and all the different areas of the world, but you will spend most of your time hanging out in the cantina there. And I just loved the design of that cantina. You can explore all the different rooms, run down all the hallways, different levels. Your room is like way down in the basement where you live. And I just love that. I want to build that cantina out of Lego. If I was more talented in building Lego, I would definitely put some effort into that. But I would love to see the concept art that went into designing that. So hopefully this book will have some of that in it. And that comes out February 20th from Dark Horse Books. Next up, we've got more The High Republic. This is the first young adult novel in Phase 3 of The High Republic. It's called Defy the Storm. Star Wars: The High Republic, Defy the Storm, written by Justina Ireland, who has been, again, with the High Republic from the very beginning. And then Tessa Gratton is one of the newer contributors, authors who have been contributing to the High Republic. I am very, very excited for this book. I have it. I have it on my coffee table in my living room. Again, they've sent it to me early, but I need to finish reading Escape from Velo and write my review of that before I could even like crack that other book open. But I'm looking forward to moving on because, like I said, the young adults entries in this series have been some of my favorites. And these two authors together, Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland, wrote a book last year or maybe about a year and a half ago called Star Wars The High Republic Path of Deceit, which I think might be my favorite book in the High Republic of all of them. So hopefully that partnership will prove fruitful again with Defy the Storm. I don't know what the plot is.
I was going to say, stepping into this book, having read the previous titles, what is it you're looking for? What is it are there any particular character lines that you are, have questions lingering in your head from what you've been reading?
What I really liked about their previous book, Path of Deceit, was how the Force became there were some gray lines drawn. It became more of a gray, shades of gray in between pure good or pure evil. Like there was this cult called the Path of the Open Hand, and they were opposed to the Jedi. The cult didn't want the Jedi to manipulate the Force. They thought it was actively harmful to the Force to use it to, levitate an object or heal somebody or anything you could do as a Jedi with the Force. This cult was opposed to. So it became a pretty interesting conflict. Of course, that cult turned out to be the villains of the story because everybody always loves the Jedi. I'm not a big Jedi person, so
Right.
I always like when at least somebody is questioning their whole deal. And hopefully we'll get some more of that. I don't know. But this that previous book took place a couple hundred years before this one that's about to come
Oh,
out.
wow.
So I don't know if
Oh,
it'll
okay.
have any connection to that, but just the authors were really good writers.
Is
Uh,
that a common storytelling device among these High Republic novels? Large jumps in timeline, but between
yeah.
them?
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I do kind of wish that the High Republic had been more forthcoming from the very beginning about where everything like I know because I pay such close attention, but I think the casual person going into a bookstore or even looking around online may not know the order in which these things take place because there's no numbers on the spines. You just have to you really got to do some research to know the sequence of the High Republic. Phase 1 took place a couple hundred years before the prequels. Phase 2 rewound time like another 175 years or something like that. And then phase 3 is now after phase 1. So chronologically, it's sort of like the
Mm.
Star Wars trilogies where it was the original trilogy, then the prequels, then the sequels. But I don't know, somebody coming into this, it might seem impenetrable to them to really dive into the High Republic, especially because there's a large volume of content.
Mhm.
There's a bunch of books in each phase and a lot of comics. I've been following along. Like I said, I've been following along from the very beginning. So I've been able to consume and keep up with all these characters and all these storylines. But honestly, if somebody came up to me and was like, well, what's the best way to go through this? I would say start with phase 2 because chronologically it takes place first, and those were the most interesting stories to me. And read the adult novels and the young adult novels. You don't have to really bother with the middle grade stuff.
It
That's really kid stuff to me. Yeah.
but it sounds like you're saying I could conceivably pick up this book and not be completely lost. I mean, there are going to be elements that I may not kind of get a deeper understanding of
Yeah.
because I don't know like kind of the history going, in the same way that if you jumped into Empire Strikes Back,
Yeah.
you're not totally lost, but
Yeah.
yet you would kind of miss having experienced what brought together Luke and Leia and Han.
Yeah, no matter what, I do think they always at least put a little bit of effort into recapping, because even me who has read all this stuff, I do need a little bit of a reminder because
Gotcha.
I'm not only reading the High Republic, I'm also consuming everything else in Star Wars and a whole bunch of other pop culture that I do in my free time. So I do need a refresher, and they do manage to put that in at the beginning of each of these stories too. So yes,
Okay.
I do think you can probably jump in. Just jump in wherever you
Because you
want.
made this title sound really intriguing to where I'm like, oh, I want to read this, but I'm glad to know that I don't have to do homework in order to pick up this.
Yeah, I would say again, if you want to jump in anywhere, I'd say start with Path of Deceit, which is the other book by these same authors. But yeah, I'm also very intrigued by this one coming up on March 5th. That's called Star Wars: The High Republic Defy the Storm. And then in April 9th, we're going back to the prequel era. Like I said earlier, it's the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace this year, and this guy John Jackson Miller is the name of the author of this book, Star Wars: The Living Force, which focuses on all the, I think, 12 members of the Jedi Council, which I don't think there's been a book really that focused on that group specifically. So very intriguing. You can see on the cover there, you got Yoda. Master Yoda is the biggest image. Then you've also got Mace Windu. There's Yaddle on the right over there. Ki Adi Mundi, the guy with the pointy head. And
Mhm.
then a couple, I think that's Eth Koth, name of that guy to his left there. And a couple, Adi Galia. I don't know. I don't remember all these people's names. But I'm curious about this. I have read stuff by John Jackson Miller previously. He wrote a bunch of the the Old Republic, Star Wars: The Old Republic comic books, which I really enjoyed. He's also written a couple Star Wars novels before. This is a guy that wrote a lot for the Legends timeline of Star Wars that they've brought back into the new canon. So there's got to be a reason for that. I think he's got some experience with this franchise and this era. Very curious about this book. Any thoughts on this one, Rebekah?
This is the title that excited me when I was looking through what's upcoming, because this is a dynamic and an era that I'm interested in learning more about.
Yeah,
That's one of those things that was always so confounding, is how did they miss so much? How did all of this
yeah,
happen under their noses? What had them so distracted? What had the Jedi Council so distracted that Palpatine was able to do what he did, and that type of thing. So I'm
yeah,
excited. I'm hoping we'll get to see more. I mean, obviously based upon the images here, it'll be fun to see more of Yoda in this role. It'll be fun to see more of Mace Windu here as well. I wonder if we'll get to see action. I'm curious to see what kind of balance this has between a diplomatic book, and exploration of
yeah.
diplomacy and that type of thing, versus action sequences. How many they've got plenty of lightsabers on the cover, so
Yes.
I'm hoping that means we'll get to hear a lot about the exploits of these Jedi with the saber. So we'll see.
And also, you kind of reminded me that the timing of this book coming out might have something to do with the release of the Acolyte, the live
Mhm.
action series that we're going to talk about a little bit later, because you were curious to know, well, how did Palpatine manage to slip by unnoticed from all of these members of the Jedi Council? And I feel like that might be part of what the Acolyte is all about, just based on
Mhm.
rumors and stuff. So
Okay.
thematically, I wonder if the timing of this novel isn't designed to tie in with that
Okay.
idea. Who knows? Up next in June, we've got June 11th coming from Tessa Gratton, who is co-writing that other book with Justina Ireland. This is the second adult novel in the High Republic Phase 3. It's called Temptation of the Force. We have no plot synopsis for this yet. We don't even have a cover for this book yet. So a big question mark. They're keeping some of this stuff secret. And, as always, I will read and review this on laughingplace.com. We don't have much more to talk about with that one, but let's go to the next one, which goes
When
back.
you hear
Yeah,
when you hear temptation of the Force, do you think light or dark?
great question. Yeah, I always would have said the dark side until really until until the Force Awakens, when we saw for the first time ever, I think, a dark side character tempted by the light side of the Force, which was like that was one of the most interesting things to me about the Force Awakens. Like,
Yeah.
okay, the stuff that we hadn't seen before. Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. This dark side guy who he wants to be on the dark side, but he feels that call.
Mhm.
Even, he's got Darth Vader's helmet there in front of him, and he thinks that he's using that as like a guidepost to the dark side, but I think it's really Anakin's redeemed Force ghost calling him toward the light side that he hears. Um, so who knows? Yeah, it could go either way. The other interesting thing when you mention that is there aren't any Sith in the High
Mhm.
Republic. They've talked about the Sith as being extinct for thousands of years or whatever, but we know that the Sith don't show their face again until the prequel trilogy era. So we haven't seen a Jedi really turn to the dark side in the High Republic. There's been little hints of that here and there,
Okay.
but my guess would be temptation toward the dark side. It would be interesting to see it the other way around, though. That's
Okay.
for sure. So the next one in August 6th, Star Wars, Mace Windu, The Glass Abyss. We talked about the Mace Windu comic book miniseries earlier, and this is going to be the novel written by Stephen Barnes. This is another author that contributed to the Legends novel timeline, has been brought back to write a Mace Windu story. Can you read part of the
Oh,
synopsis
sorry. Yeah,
there? I've
I
kind of
blocked that over
forgotten.
for you. But no, this says that the Jedi are reeling from the sudden death of
Yeah.
Qui-Gon Jinn, and Mace Windu's feelings have been complicated regarding Qui-Gon, and it's not any simpler now that he's dead. So it's talking about how he appreciated Qui-Gon's unique perspective and their shared dedication to the Force, but without that Jedi's influence and those unorthodox views, Mace is feeling out of balance.
Hmm. So
So,
pretty interesting there.
oh,
Again,
and then
this
he
one,
gets a
yeah,
final message from Qui-Gon.
yeah,
So it has his last request.
right, to investigate some kind of goings on in the Outer Rim. Uh, More Mace Windu. This book
Yes.
takes place, looks like, right after the Phantom Menace, right
Hmm.
after Qui-Gon's death. I'll be reading and reviewing it. Is this something that is appealing to you?
Yes. And I love the way they've leaned into the purple on the cover.
Yeah, and I also love the design of the cover of this book. It's kind of Mace Windu holding his lightsaber up above his head, but his cloak is flapping up around him and forming the Jedi Order insignia,
Yes.
which is pretty neat. A pretty neat cover there. So tempting. Sorry, yeah, intriguing. Definitely looking forward to reading this one. And that's coming out August 8th. It's called Star Wars Mace Windu, The Glass Abyss by Stephen Barnes. We've got another couple High Republic titles coming that have been announced already. August 27th, Star Wars The High Republic, Beware the Nameless. And I think this is the second middle grade title in phase 3 of the High Republic by Zoraida Cordova, who has written some Star Wars stuff
Hmm.
before. You want to read the synopsis there for that one?
It says over a year has passed since the destruction of Starlight Beacon, and hopeful Jedi in training, including Tep Tep and Keeldo, must work with Ram and a few new friends to overcome their fears and stop the monsters that threaten the very
Yeah.
existence of the Jedi.
So this book is called the um, Beware the Nameless, and the Nameless are these creatures who can basically eat the Force, and they're the only advantage that these villains have over the Jedi.
That's
The
right.
villains are called the Nile, and they have access to these creatures that basically turn the Jedi into ashen husks. Uh, it's pretty horrifying, actually. But they are doing this book, this middle grade book, that will zoom in on those creatures, it seems like, and continue the story of some of the characters that have popped up. Yeah.
No, sorry. Is the ashen husk, like, are they dead at that point? Or is that
Yeah, they're
something that
dead.
can be restored? Okay.
There's been, I think, 1 or 2 instances where the process was, like, interrupted,
Gotcha.
and they can survive that, but if the creature is allowed to feast on the Jedi, yeah, the Jedi is killed and just turned into a pile of ash, basically.
Feels like a Dementor.
Sure. I'm not a Harry Potter person, but I have
Kind of
heard
that
that.
dynamic. Because I feel like
Okay.
they could interrupt that process as well, but there was
Right.
at some point at which it was too far and you were gone. Okay.
There you go. Yeah, so we'll be exploring more of that. That's August 27th, The High Republic, Beware the Nameless, and then we're getting an reference book in The High Republic from Insight Editions called Star Wars: The High Republic: The Lightsaber Collection by Daniel Wallace, who wrote the previous iteration of this series called Star Wars: The Lightsaber Collection. This one obviously is going to focus on all the different lightsabers in the High Republic era. It's very cool. I think, especially for fans who build this kind of stuff or want to cosplay as some of the High Republic characters, it's always cool for them to have this kind of resource where you can really zoom in on the details of these lightsabers that were designed for this era. I thought it was pretty interesting recently in the comic books. They've explained why the Jedi went from these more ornate lightsabers to the more like utilitarian sabers that they use in the prequel era. I thought that was a cool little detail that was put in by Charles Soule in his Shadows of Starlight comic book series. But yeah, the High Republic lightsaber collection, looking forward to flipping through this. And I even own, I should have brought it to show. I bought that limited edition Stellan Gios lightsaber from Galaxy's Edge that you can buy over there. I think it's still available. It was a limited edition, but it did not sell out the way that Cal Kestis or some of the other limited lightsabers have at Doc Ondar's Den of Antiquities. I think because not as many people are exposed to the High Republic, it is mostly in the publishing side. But yeah, this will be a great resource for people wanting to learn more about the lightsabers from that era. And that's coming on August 27th from Insight Editions. The last book that I want to talk about before we move on to other media is called Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures, Liss and the Snowy Mountain Rescue. Now, this is from Golden Books, so you know this is targeted at very young Star Wars fans, coming out September 3rd. And this is an adaptation of an episode of Young Jedi Adventures that has already been released. And I just wanted to mention this just so that I get another little reference to the Young Jedi Adventures in this list of things that are coming in 2024, because I did talk about the next batch of episodes coming from this series on Disney Plus and Disney Junior, but we are also getting this Golden Books adaptation of one of the episodes for younger kids coming in September. And that's going to bring us to the end of the books, and we'll go into video games coming from Star Wars and Lucasfilm Games in 2024. The first one is one that's been delayed a couple times. It is being released for mobile platforms and for Nintendo Switch. It's called Star Wars Hunters, and it's from the publisher Zynga, Zynga. I think I played a preview of this a couple Comic Cons ago, or at some convention somewhere. They've had booths about it at Star Wars Celebration. And I think it's finally going to come out. There's no release date for this. It keeps getting delayed. It does seem pretty interesting. It looks like a fun mobile game. What's most appealing about this to me is all the different characters. They were very creative in putting together some of these characters. Like, one of the characters you can play as is two Jawas stacked on top of each other. You can see them on the left side there on the poster. And then there's also a droid who believes he's a Jedi, which I thought was he's like been programmed to believe that he's a Jedi. I thought that was very interesting. So this is kind of like an arena battle style multiplayer game, which I I don't tend to go for multiplayer games. I like the single player gaming experience where I could just kind of sit by myself and take my time and not have to worry about other people yelling at me. But I may check this out. It's actually a free download, so there's no harm, no foul if you want to check this out on your Nintendo Switch or your mobile platform like iOS or Android when this comes out. And I think the way it makes money is you can buy upgrades and other characters and stuff. So it's one of those like micro transaction things. But I will probably check out the free version of this just to see what I think when it's released sometime this year, hopefully. Any thoughts on this one, Rebekah?
It looks like fun. I'm gonna have to check out the trailer. I know there's
Yeah.
been some footage out there on like on the Star Wars YouTube and such. So yeah, I'm gonna have to check out this double height Jawa.
Yeah.
That looks way too fun.
And then, so that's Star Wars Hunters from Zynga. And then the one that I'm really excited for is Star Wars Outlaws from Ubisoft. And I think the developer, the developer was Massive Entertainment. I know they've done some good stuff before. Outlaws is an open world Star Wars game. And the thing that appeals to me about this is that it's set in the Star Wars underworld, which is my favorite corner of the Star Wars galaxy. It's not about Jedi. I don't think you have force powers in this one. I really enjoyed the Star Wars Jedi games, though. So if this is kind of like that, but in the underworld, it might be right up my alley. It just looks really appealing. I saw some footage of this at, let's see, I think it was Comic-Con last year, San Diego Comic-Con. There was a whole panel about it, and everything they showed just looked really, really cool. Have you seen anything that stuck out to you about this game?
I like her little sidekick that's sitting up there on her shoulder. That's adorable.
Yeah, she has a little critter that's on her shoulder there, and then a droid.
It feels like a real, like where Cal had the adorable, is it BD?
Yes.
That's a droid, but adorable and kind of sits on the shoulder and whatnot as far as gameplay goes. This feels like a similar dynamic, but in like, alien form rather than droid form. So cool. I like it.
Exactly. And he's kind of your little cuddly little sidekick that sits on your shoulder. And then it looks like you also get a droid who's maybe your heavy, the guy who does the fighting for you.
What characters that we already know do you think we might encounter? Because my memory is that with the one with Cal, you do encounter like C-3PO, right? At some isn't, or no, there's just a protocol droid. It's not C-3PO.
You'd meet like Saw Gerrera is in the Jedi games. In this one, I want to say Jabba the Hutt showed up in the footage that they showed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so really dealing in that underworld with the crime syndicates and stuff could be very, very cool. Even our pal Drew from Heroes of the Halcyon chimed in to say Outlaws looks so cool. And yeah, we know that those folks over there at Heroes of the Halcyon are very into the immersive side of Star Wars, which this very much looks like it will fit into that world. I also wanted to mention from the world of Lucasfilm games, this is not Star Wars, but I do like to talk about non-Star Wars Lucasfilm properties here on Who's the Bossk. We are getting a new Indiana Jones video game that has been teased for a while, and it looks like it's finally getting ready to come out. It's from the developer Bethesda, who has been known for making some great games over the years. We don't know the title yet. There's been rumors about the title, but we won't really announce it here until we know for sure. And we also don't have a release date for it. But I have played most, if not all, of the Indiana Jones video games that have come out ever. And I'm always interested to see what they're doing next with that franchise. So we'll keep our eyes open for this new Indiana Jones game as more information comes out. The only downside to this for me is that it looks to be an Xbox and PC exclusive, which means I can't play it on my PlayStation 5. I'll have to figure out a way. Maybe I have to get a new computer to play this game. But that's a problem for me not having an Xbox Series X. I have a PS5. I don't know. Have you played an Indiana Jones game? Are you excited for this one?
I can't think of any an Indiana Jones game I've played beyond a pinball
Okay.
machine that was Indiana
Mm,
Jones. So no,
yeah.
but I am eager for the adventure because, as I mentioned earlier, I will go find gamers and watch them play so that I experience the storyline.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think is there a mystery that, because it's the on the table you have ancient circle, forbidden
Yeah.
stories, myths that made us. Is there a particular, because we've seen Indy seek the Grail, we've seen
Yeah.
Indy seek the Crystal Skull. Like, is there something that you would want to be in search of with Indy? Like, if you could pick it.
Good question. Yeah. I don't know if they've actually, like the Antikythera, which they did in Dial of Destiny, would have been on that list. So James Mangold was on top of it. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll come up with something. The appeal of these games to me is you get to spend so much more time in that world and explore. You're the one playing as Indiana Jones, going into those ancient temples and exploring. It's kind of like Uncharted or Tomb Raider, but bringing it back to the
Is
character that really inspired those characters. Yeah.
So let's think, what is there a civilization whose treasure you would like? Because sometimes it's been Aztec, sometimes it's
Right.
been as Drew puts, that he needs to
Yeah.
play Fate of Atlantis again.
Yeah,
So
so
is there a
Indiana Jones and the Fate of
civilization you want to?
Atlantis, that was a computer game when I was growing up that I loved, more of a point and click adventure type thing. Boy, I don't know. I feel like they've covered all their bases with that kind of
Okay.
stuff, but I'm guessing and hoping that they've come up with something fresh that I haven't thought of, that I can't think of because, it's not my job, like
No, I get
they're
it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, I wish I was more creative and was able to come up with something that they haven't done already, but, I'm trusting them to have, brainstormed it and landed on something cool. I don't know. Anything jump out at you that you would like to see?
Well, having not played the any kind of indie games, the door is wide open for me, because I was thinking, Atlantis would be a fun kind of mystery to dive into. Yeah, I don't know, maybe. Yeah, I just I don't want to. I'm kind of hoping it stays away from kind of the Central America, Aztec, or I feel like that have had enough. I'm ready to kind of move to some other ancient civilization. So
Yeah.
we'll see which one they select. I'm eager. I think that's what I'm interested to see, kind of which civilization are we going to be exploring with Indy.
I'm curious about that too, and yeah, there has been a little teaser trailer released. I think a year or more ago, they put out this teaser that had this image in it that you can see in that post there. And there are some clues in there. And if you want to go in and maybe put the clues together and decipher what this is all about, otherwise, we got to wait until we have more information from Bethesda on this new Indiana Jones video game. Again, we don't have a release date for that, but let's move on into the big stuff coming from Star Wars and Lucasfilm in the world of Disney Plus on TV. The first thing that I believe is coming, if I had to guess, the first thing that we'll see on Disney Plus from Star Wars this year is The Bad Batch Season 3. And this is the continuation and conclusion, because it is the final season of The Bad Batch, which was created by Dave Filoni, and it is being showrun by Brad Rau and Jennifer Corbett. We don't know the release date of this, but I'm guessing it's going to be within the next 2 or 3 months or so. Voice actors D. Bradley Baker is coming back as the clones, all the clones of Jango Fett. Michelle Ang will be back as Omega. You've also got Noshir Dalal, who plays Rampart, the Imperial Vice Admiral, and then Rhea Perlman, I'm sure will be back as Sid, who kind of betrayed the Bad Batch at the end of season 2. What are your thoughts on the Bad Batch? How did you like those first 2 seasons? Are you excited for what we might get in season 3 coming up here, Rebekah?
I'm excited for the upcoming season, but I have to be honest and say that I would like to go back and revisit some of what happened
Yeah.
in previous, because it didn't stick with me. I enjoyed
Okay.
it while I was watching it, but if you were to ask me kind of what happened, I don't remember a lot anymore. It's kind of an odd thing.
Well, in my memory, I've only seen each episode once of the entire series, I believe. I'm pretty sure that's the case. Except, I think they showed one at some convention, then I watched it again when it came out. But I believe season 2 ended with Omega having been captured by the Empire and being held in their like cloning facility on Mount Tantus or whatever. And I think there was also the reveal that there was a female clone, an adult female clone of Jango Fett that was also hanging out there at that cloning facility. There was that scientist guy played by Jimmy Simpson, the actor. That's he's kind of an interesting dude. So we'll see more of that. And then there's also the question of whether Tech is actually dead or not, because he kind of plummeted to his death. I kind of hope they leave him dead because I like there to be stakes in these shows, but given the history of the Bad Batch, I have a feeling they're going to bring him back. I don't know. Do
Yeah.
you think
I
he's
did
really dead?
I did not leave that episode believing him to be dead, but maybe that's me being overly optimistic. Um,
Yeah. I don't know. I always want deaths to stick. And I think James Gunn, the filmmaker, talked about this and how he prefers the world of uh like Marvel Cinematic Universe movies to the comics because you have the opportunity to have the character deaths actually like mean something, like Yondu when he died at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Like it means something in the movies more than it does in the comics, because in the comics, they're going to be back in a year or two. But yeah, I hope the death sticks. I'll be a little disappointed if it doesn't, but we will be watching and discussing all of the Bad Batch season 3 as it comes up on Disney Plus. It is an animated series. I don't think I mentioned that already, and I mostly enjoy it. I think there's been some episodes that people would call filler, and I would agree with that. It has its ups and downs, like anything. There's too many episodes in a season. Really, is the problem to me. I think it has 16
mm,
episodes each season, and they're not all bangers, as the kids would say, right? Like,
sure.
yeah. Let's move on and talk about The Acolyte. This, I believe, is the next live action Disney Plus Star Wars series. It is created by Leslie Headland, who is the showrunner on Russian Doll, a series that I have still yet to watch. It will star Daphne Keane, Amanda Stenberg, Jodie Turner Smith, Jonas Swotamo, who played Chewbacca in the sequel trilogy. He's back as a different Wookiee, a Jedi Wookiee in this series, which takes place at the very end of the High Republic era. We talked about that in publishing. It's coming to live action. There are connections between the publishing side of the High Republic and the Acolyte. We know at least one character is going to be represented in both of those. Other than that, we don't have a ton of information about the actual plot of the Acolyte. I'm not a big Jedi person, like I said earlier. So, of the 2 live action series coming this year, this one is the less interesting to me. Although, like most Star Wars, I will be there watching it as soon as it drops and be excited to watch it and give my thoughts on it. What do you think, Rebekah? The Acolyte, does this appeal to you?
Well, okay, so I feel like this is a bit of a high stakes
Yeah.
arrival because this will be a lot of people's first dip into High Republic, right? I mean,
Yes, because most
so
people are not reading the books and comics.
so to me, it's very interesting as far as that goes because you're dealing with okay, so you have this whole new timeline of Star Wars in a way, and I'm interested to see how that's embraced. Do people get excited and invested in these characters? Do they get invested in this world? And therefore, do they then is this a launching point to embrace all the others or not? Um, so I'm intrigued in that way to see if I am if I do embrace it, because it is going to be we're dealing with hundreds of years before anything that's familiar
Yeah.
to us. We haven't really had that kind of visual representation of something so far outside of what timeline we originally arrived on with A New Hope. We've
Right.
had, a generation and a generation. This is like hundreds of years.
Well, I wanna say the Acolyte is a bit closer to the events
Okay.
of the prequels than the High Republic books and comics, like, it's closer to 100 years or less, uh,
Okay.
the beginning of the prequel trilogy. For that reason, it is very intriguing, it is, appealing to see how they bridge the gap between those 2 eras of Star Wars, and yes, we haven't really seen the Jedi Order at its height in live action before. So for that reason, it's also very intriguing and appealing. So, um, yeah, I think the only hesitation I have about it really is that I'm not super into the Jedi, and I think I kind of wish Star Wars would steer away from the Jedi a little bit. But I understand that that's the first thing people think of when they think of Star Wars. So having this period where the Jedi are all over the place, most of the characters are going to be Jedi. I understand why that would be appealing to the people in charge, because you don't, in The Mandalorian, as popular as that is, there aren't a ton of, there's a couple Jedi characters that show up, but it's mostly not about the Jedi. Here you have the opportunity to have most of the main characters be Jedi. I don't know. We'll see. I will keep an open mind. I'm curious to see what they're doing. It's nice to have fresh voices coming in to tell these stories. It looks like an appealing cast. I don't know what else to say about it because we just don't know very much.
So
Yeah.
just so I understand, this is set near the end of the High Republic era.
Yes.
So therefore, it's not as far back as my mind has it set. It's
Right.
much closer to the prequels.
Correct. Although
Okay.
we did get confirmation at Star Wars Celebration this past year in London that at least one character that has been in the books will be in the show as well.
Okay.
So there's some continuity there, but I think they're using the High Republic as the name of an era rather than having it have, I mean, it does have direct connections to the
Gotcha.
books, but I think the story that they're telling in the books right now in the publishing side will have wrapped up on the timeline before the events of the Acolyte, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
so this isn't
yeah,
playing into that as much as I had thought it was.
yeah,
So that's a learning for me. But also, I'm curious, does that mean that there are characters within the more foundationally known Star Wars universe who have a timeline that could put them into the Acolyte in any way? Is there
definitely. Yes.
Okay.
Master Yoda is on the Jedi Council at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a few other members of the
Interesting.
Jedi Council, I think, who are long-lived alien species that could show up.
Okay.
Wookiees are long-lived.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think there is a chance we might see more of those characters. Maz Kanata has shown up in the High Republic, and she's in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. She's a very long-lived alien species, so theoretically she could pop up here. Yeah, there's a handful of characters that would be on that list.
Is there anything in particular that you're looking to come out of the Acolyte as a fan?
I mean, there were rumors that this series will dip into the mythology of Darth Sidious and Darth Plagueis, who was Darth
Okay.
Sidious's master. If that happens, I'll be, like any Star Wars fan, I would be very anxious to see some of that. If we get a very young Palpatine, or even removed from Palpatine, a hint at what Darth Plagueis was up to during this period, and how that plan kind of gets kicked into motion at this point in the timeline, I would be very curious to see that.
And the term acolyte, what does that
Yeah.
what does that bring to mind specifically? Because I know it has specific meaning.
Yeah, well, when the title was announced, my thoughts immediately jumped to Palpatine being an acolyte of a follower of Plagueis.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
but am I thinking the entirely wrong direction? I mean, there have to be villains in this somehow. I don't think they're going to be the Nile, which are the villains in the High Republic. I think, like I said, that threat will be dealt with in the
Okay.
publishing, and we'll have something else here. Who are the villains of the Acolyte? Is it the beginning of the Sith rearing their ugly heads again in the galaxy? That I think would be the most interesting way to deal with this, but
Okay.
we'll see. So the other live action series that we're getting from Lucasfilm and Disney Plus this year, it was supposed to come out at the end of last year, and I think the strike both strikes, the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild, kind of scrambled Disney to reorganize the schedule, shuffle things around a bit. And if I had to guess, this will be the one we get at the end of the year this year. It's called Star Wars Skeleton Crew. It's created by John Watts and Christopher Ford. They both worked on the most recent Spider-Man trilogy from Marvel Studios. It stars Kerry Condon, Jude Law, Ryan Kira Armstrong, Tunde Adebimpe, I'm probably mangling that name, and then Ravi Cabot Conyers, along with a bunch of other kids. I know they've said it's inspired by movies like The Goonies that I grew up with. I am a huge fan of The Goonies. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. So those two worlds, those two aesthetics combining is very, very appealing to me. I know it also has something to do with pirates, much like The Goonies does. I think there is a character that survived, a pirate character that survived season 3 of The Mandalorian called Vane, that is going to pop up in Skeleton Crew. That is my understanding. This is the one that I'm super psyched about. I think it's flying under the radar right now. I actually bought a shirt at Star Wars Celebration. They were selling the shirts of, you could get the Acolyte, you could get Skeleton Crew, other upcoming stuff at the merch table or the merch booth at Star Wars Celebration. I bought Skeleton Crew, just kind of investing in the future, to say I was on, an early adopter of this series, early adapter, whatever. And yeah, this is the one that I think is going to turn out to be my favorite of all this stuff coming in 2024. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I'm excited to see the universe of Star Wars explored in a new way. I
Yeah.
I like that kind of genre shift, where it's a familiar, like familiar in that we're the world that has been created is familiar, but yet we're being presented it in a different, not a space opera, not
Yeah.
a, so yeah, so
Right.
that'll
Because
be.
it is from the perspective of the kids, I believe. They've said the story is about a group of kids who get lost in the Star Wars galaxy, which sounds fun. And they've said just because it's about kids doesn't mean it is a kids show, which I think was reassuring to me. But it
Mm-hmm.
also made me think of the stuff that I loved as a kid, like The Goonies. And The Goonies is about kids, but it doesn't, when you watch The Goonies, they're swearing, it doesn't necessarily feel like a kids movie you would watch these days. So in that way, it appealed to me both then and now. But yeah, I feel like there's this uh, tradition of making kids movies, that there's this idea that only kids movies can star kids and only movies for adults can star adults. And I think there's something to be said about mixing that up a little bit. So I like the idea. I like the premise. I like the approach. I like the concept art and the few images that have been released. But this is another example where we just don't know too much more about this besides what we've already said until we get more trailers and information. We just kind of have to trust that these creators, and this is one of those series that's under the umbrella of being produced by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. It is set in the Mandoverse after Return of the Jedi. We know that as well. And yeah, it should be cool. I don't know. I hope it's cool. That's what I'm hoping.
Agreed.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing we know about it is the list of directors. I think we have the list of directors from both the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew out there somewhere, and there's some very talented people on both of those lists. I want to say the Daniels, who made Everything Everywhere All at Once, directed an episode of Skeleton Crew, and there's some other very big names on that list too. So a group of very talented people putting together a new kind of Star Wars live action TV show that is inspired by the stuff that I grew up watching and loving and still love. So very intrigued by that. That should be coming before year's end. But otherwise, we've got all that other stuff to look forward to, from publishing, from the books, from the comics, from video games, into TV, animation, and live action. Bunch of exciting Star Wars stuff. It should be another full year. On the theatrical side, there's nothing coming this year from Lucasfilm, sadly, from any of their properties, including Star Wars. But that announcement that we talked about earlier about The Mandalorian and Grogu hopefully will mean in the coming years, 2025 and beyond, we'll get more Star Wars on the big screen. And we'll look forward to that. I'm looking forward to that. And all this other stuff too. Let's wrap up this episode of Who's the Bossk with the segment we call First Steps into a Larger World. This is where we talk about the other media that we've been consuming and or enjoying outside of Star Wars. My example this week actually goes back to our friend Drew Gergich there in the comments. He insisted that I check out Ryan Johnson's series Poker Face, which is on Peacock. We watched that on Peacock, which we got a free 6-month subscription to for buying tickets to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Orlando, which is very fortunate because this show is just a lot of fun. It's heavily inspired by Columbo, which is another series that I love. We were listing all the things that this show has in common with Columbo, and there's a lot of them. And that I was reading an interview with Ryan Johnson, which said that he was also inspired by Quantum Leap, another show from that era, different era of television that he took a lot of influence from in creating Poker Face. A lot of fun. It can be very, very silly in times, but I enjoyed that about it as well, for the same reasons that I loved those older shows too. So you should check that out. We're not done with season 1. We're about halfway through, but very much enjoying it. How about you, Rebecca? Yeah.
Have you reached the one with the barbecue?
Yes, that was with Lil Rel Howery.
I think that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
In the series was the one that where the main plot line circulated around a barbecue, but that was a highlight for my husband and I. We very much enjoyed that series.
Yeah, it's a fun show. We were saying that it's odd that the main character she hasn't quite commented on the fact yet where we are. She hasn't commented on the fact that everywhere she goes there's a murder. Like is it me? Like,
right?
Am I causing these murders wherever I go? But that's part of the fun, and it does harken back to this other era of episodic TV series. Well, there is kind of an overarching plot that I'm sure they're going to get back to again in the finale of season 1, but by and large all the other episodes are like standalone mysteries, which is great, and yeah, just a lot of fun. How about you, Rebecca? What have you been enjoying lately?
My current destination television is Monarch on Apple TV. It is a Godzilla series,
right? So this kind of ties in with the current theatrical Godzilla movies, right? Like Godzilla versus Kong or whatever.
Yeah. From what I understand, it's that same universe for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, I did not know anything about it going in because I just was unaware. And I love the classic, like Ancient of Days Godzilla films.
Right.
So it feels familiar to that, but there are there's some actors in it that I did not know. And so for me, I guess it is well known who's in this, but it wasn't to me. And so that moment um, was like, wow, no way, really? I can't, I'm so happy to see on screen. My husband would say that For All Mankind is what he would talk about, but
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, and then I lost interest in it. So that's why I'm talking about Monarch, because it just finished its first season, and I was mesmerized like the whole time. My only disappointment in it is that I would love to see more monsters. There's not.
Okay.
I would like more monster, but I feel like I typically feel that way in the modern era, especially that I want more monster. But
Okay. Yeah, and this is Apple TV Plus
yeah,
series.
an Apple TV series. So
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, people keep telling me to watch the new Godzilla movie, Godzilla minus zero or whatever it's called,
yeah,
minus one.
I've heard good things about it.
Okay.
It sounds
And
more
then
intense. It sounds more intense than I mean, I'm barely able to watch certain moments of
okay.
this one, and it's on my, my big screen television at home. So I tend to be I watch the monster movies on my little screen. I like them that way. But yeah, I've heard really amazing things about Godzilla in theaters, the current one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I never got into Godzilla I've seen some of them, scattered Godzilla movies here and there, but I guess the people who are fans are very excited about the
I
recent stuff. So
I like sumo wrestling, and it's kind of
yeah.
just sumo
Okay.
wrestling in
Fair enough. Fair
an
enough.
odd fantasy setting. By the way, Mike, you
Yes.
didn't mention. Okay, I'm a total Star Wars casual, especially in comparison to you and your usual lineup, and so I greatly appreciate you letting me kick off your season.
Sure.
But because I'm a Star Wars casual, you didn't even end up mentioning what most I'm looking forward to in the world of Star Wars coming in
Uh-oh.
2024.
What did I miss?
The soundtrack that they're going to bring to Galaxy's Edge. So when I watch the
Oh,
fireworks
yes.
exploding over Oga's Cantina, I get to enjoy in universe music with it.
Well, I am planning to do an episode about the return of Season of the Force to Disneyland. So that will be coming up this spring. Sorry, I just didn't cram it in here.
I don't think it really fits in your list, but
Yeah.
like I say, as a casual, that's kind of what's on my Star
Yeah.
Wars to-do list this year. Is I'm very eager to experience that over it, because I love fireworks. I love Star Wars in the theme park. Star Tours is, I think, my favorite Disneyland attraction. And so I'm super thrilled that they're finally giving it an
Yeah.
in universe score for the fireworks. When you see them, they're exploding over Batu.
Yeah, that should be a lot of fun, and we will definitely be covering that here on Who's the Bossk. So stay tuned for that in the coming months. Until then, let's wrap up this episode by saying a big thank you to Rebekah Mosley for taking some time out of her busy week to come and chat about Star Wars. Rebekah, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Can you just point people toward where you're going to be next? I know you have a Barely Necessities coming up this afternoon.
Well, I bounce around Laughing Place in various capacities. You'll find me with the team on Mondays talking about the Disney parks. I'm here on Tuesdays talking about Disney merchandise. And then tomorrow, I'm actually going to be talking with our travel partners over at MEI Mousetrap Travel about some of the upcoming Adventures by Disney like river cruise, smaller
Yeah.
cruise options that Adventures by Disney does. So we're beginning to do more YouTube programming, kind of focusing specifically on various travel options and more travel insights oriented. So I'm
Okay.
co-hosting that. So yeah, so they bounce me around here and there.
I am super intrigued by those Adventures by Disney. They look so much fun, and my wife is a much bigger, more like adventurous traveler than I am. So doing having meeting in the middle and having it be like a Disney type thing, it might appeal to me a bit more than just like going off on our own and trying to find our way around a place that I'm not familiar with,
Having done
Yeah.
one in visiting Yellowstone, Wyoming, I cannot recommend them enough because they're exactly as you described.
Yeah.
They are a nice kind of in between for that. Most of the people on our trip had that dynamic in the family. The very adventurous outdoors person, and then the other person who is maybe more inclined to the familiar, more maybe indoors oriented. So like you say, a nice, safe way to explore it.
Sweet. Okay, that's going to bring us to the end of this week's premiere, the season 5 premiere of Who's the Bossk. On the next episode, I don't know for sure what's going to be next, to be honest with you. I'm going to guess it will be the Bad Batch season 3 premiere. We'll be talking about that. So there might be another gap between this and whatever the next episode is. Otherwise, I'll be looking out for something else we can talk about, and we'll be right back here on Who's the Bossk, talking about more Star Wars. In the meantime, you can follow me on Instagram at Who's the Bossk Pod. And as always, please visit laughingplace.com for all your Disney news and opinions. My name is Mike Celestino. Thank you so much for listening and or watching live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. See you next time. Thanks again. Bye.